Hi there. Welcome to Let's Talk About, a video podcast where I invite another film nerd to join me in a deep dive conversation about a film we've both watched recently. In this episode, I'll be chatting with Brian from Dragon Movie Guy, link in the description, about Zack Snyder's Justice League. Okay, here's the logline from IMDb. Determined to ensure Superman's ultimate sacrifice was not in vain, Bruce Wayne aligns forces with Diana Prince with plans to recruit a team of metahumans to protect the world from an approaching threat of catastrophic proportions. The film is directed by Zack Snyder, hence Zack Snyder's Justice League, screenplay by Terrio, and starring Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, Gal Gadot, Ray Fisher, Jason Momoa, and Ezra Miller. Here are the ideological ingredients, because it's never just a movie. Does it pass the Bechdel test? No. Is it class conscious? That's a no again. Would it earn a reframe stamp? I don't think it will. Is it union made? Yes, it is. Now, here's a quick note. Weeks ago, Brian and I actually, shortly after the film came out, we had a great chat, but it went on a long time, 4 hours long, and I'm just too lazy to edit that much. So we had another conversation, and this is what you're going to see shortly. Now, I had some tech difficulties with Brian's video, and that was my bad. That said, his sound is fine, and I think you're really going to enjoy this. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League. Okay, let's welcome to the show Dragon Movie Guy, our good friend Brian. How you doing, man?
Great, Rob. How are you doing?
Pretty damn good. I may have mentioned before, this is not the first time we've actually, not the first time you tried to be on the show, not the first time I've had you on the show. It's never been put out, and if I have anything to say about it, never will. Because it's just too damn long, and I'm just too damn lazy. That said...
It's a work product, that's what she said, Joe. Yes.
Why don't you... For the sake of our viewers here on Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the Rob Christensen channel, why don't you tell us a bit about you and your show, Dragon Movie Guy?
Hi guys, I am Dragon Movie Guy, first name Brian, but here I'm Dragon Movie Guy. I love movies. I've loved movies and TV and pop culture my entire life. I also love sports. I was a professional journalist for 18 years, mostly in the city of Las Vegas, where I currently live, Las Vegas, Nevada. And before that, in high school, I worked at a movie theater for 7 years. And even some of my first memories with my parents and with my family as a young kid, I remember going to see Empire Strikes Back in the theaters when I was 5. I remember seeing E.T. in theaters the following year. I remember Drew Barrymore being one of my first crushes because we're roughly about the same age. So I have been a lifelong movie fan, a lifelong television pop culture fan. And I figured after working 18 years in local TV news, mostly in the city of Las Vegas, I figured why not take a chance on YouTube? Why not try talking about movies the same, like I do with all my friends and family down here on the internet, on the interwebs, and try and get that out there on YouTube and see what I can build with that. So hence I'm here as Dragon Movie Guy.
Super cool. Where did Dragon Movie Guy come from? Where is that from?
So I am half Asian on my mom's side. And when I tried going into news, no one cared. There's a premium placed on diversity, and no one cares about the white half of me. So I thought, why not try and exploit the Asian half of me? So I figured if I used my middle name and the family name from that side of the family, I could try and get my hook, get my attention that way. And back then it was sending VHS tapes to news directors around the country. And I figured if you're a news director and you're staring at 100 tapes, if you see John Smith, John Smith, John Smith, John Smith, and then, ooh, maybe I can take this one here and make him a sports guy. Boom. I thought maybe that would make the difference. Turns out it didn't. But while I was doing my reporting internship and learning how to shoot with a camera, I was friends with somebody, and I had a crush on Sharon Stone, and he and I both loved talking about movies. And at that point, Sharon Stone was married to a guy, and they went to the Komodo Islands, and her husband, Sharon Stone's husband, got bit by a Komodo dragon. And
starting to see where this is going. Yeah.
So it became the last name I was using was very similar to Komodo. So it was sort of like Komodo Dragon, and then it got shortened to Dragon. And I love movies, so hence that's where I got Dragon Movie Guy.
I love that. Real life sort of how things tack onto other things. Then all of a sudden you have this whole other label that's actually a whole piece of like a number of parts of your life. That's super cool, man. Thank you so much for sharing that with me and with the viewers. That's awesome. Now, what I'll do is I'll say, yes, folks, this is not the first time Brian and I have had this conversation. As a matter of fact, we went through the same agenda we always do. We start with first thoughts. We talk about the look, the sound, the performances, the story, much like we would do on Sunday nights. And it was interesting. It became such a great long conversation, like at a great dinner party. We went on tangents about the cultural character of superheroes. We talked like it went on so long that I'm like, I believe the message I sent to you, Brian, was, this is so long. It's almost 4 hours. It's like 3 hours and 48 minutes of us having a great conversation. It needs to be edited. And that means it comes out in May or probably never, because it's just so much great stuff. But I thought I had such a great time with Brian. He's got such a clear, distinct view, not just on Zack Snyder, but on film. And so maybe what we're going to do is we're going to try it again. We're going to be successful this time. But we're going to kind of constrain ourselves to more sharing our views. So it's like he'll go first, I'll go next. If we're going to ask each other questions, it's going to be just to kind of clarify in our minds, so hopefully in your minds, where we're coming from. And from there, we encourage you then at each step of the way. We want to hear your thoughts, not just about what we say, but what you think on these this breakdown, the way we break down film, which is, again, the looks, the sound, the performance, the story, the meaning, and then the director. And we wrap it up in first and final thoughts. So with that out of the way, Brian, let me pull up the overlay if I can find it. Actually, I'm going to go first.
Okay.
First, you know what? Before we even start this, folks, I'm going to shamelessly beg for a like. So if you hey, you've been here this long, because I've already done a preamble like I do for every show. Been here this long, might as well, right? If you haven't already, please subscribe. And don't forget not just to subscribe to me, but check out Brian on YouTube. You'll just search Dragon Movie Guy. There's also a link to his channel in the description. And then, of course, for both of us, please ring the bell. All right. Now we'll seriously, honestly, finally get started once I get all this nonsense off the screen. All right. What are your thoughts, Brian? Take it away.
Opening thoughts on the Snyder Cut. This is 4 hours, 2 minutes, and 36 seconds, I believe, of Zack Snyder getting his say on the Snyder Cut, or on Justice League. He was originally the director of the whole DCU, really. It starts up with him with Man of Steel. It goes to Dawn of Justice on Batman v Superman. And he left the production part of the way through production on Justice League. Never got to quite finish it. Online pressure to get him to release the Kraken or release the Snyder Cut. HBO Max, needing original content, gave him reportedly $70 million to finish. And what we see with the Snyder Cut is 4 hours and 2 minutes. It is 6 parts and an epilogue of his definitive vision of the story for Justice League. And my first thought is it's pretty much what I expected to see. If you are a huge Zack Snyder fan, you're probably going to be really happy. If you like your superheroes actually less angsty, more colorful, more fun, less fun than the original Justice League from 2017. I don't want to get too far ahead though, but
yeah. No, that's a great way to start. For myself, my friend, I'll repeat what was said in the earlier conversation. Boy, this is a long, hard slog if you are not a Snyder fan. If you're a Snyder fan, you're probably not watching this anyway, but you definitely, if you are, I'm sure you'd agree, you got everything you wanted. It is his, for better and for worse, his unadulterated vision of how this could and should be. And yeah, so I think that's about all I have to say on that. Long, hard slog. Boy, I like to repeat that. But definitely, if you're a Snyder fan, this probably presses all your buttons, like with a big hand mashing all the buttons on the phone. So,
if you don't like Superman as a big blue Boy Scout, if you like him depressed and angry and yelling, if you like that, if you like the black Superman suit over the red, white, or red, yellow, and blue suit, this is the film for you. If you are a sycophant for Zack Snyder, this is the film for you.
This is your show.
If you think that just because something is dark, oh, it's so dark, it's so great. If you think it's great because it's dark, this movie is for you.
This is your thing. All right. Well, on that note, why don't we jump into... we'll do qualifiers after, if you've got a qualifier. But one word, is it worth our audience's time?
If you have 4 hours, no. No. I mean, there are plenty of things worse, but I would say no.
I agree with you. The Snyder fan isn't watching, or the Snyder fan has already seen it. I'm not saying they're not watching this, but they've already seen it, and they've declared it whether or not it's worth their time. For the rest of you, no. That said, if you've already seen it, we're about to enter the spoiler zone, so stick around. Because we're going to talk about it, because we decided for you to actually check this out. We took it upon ourselves to sit through it for 4 or more hours, because you need a break. How did one guy put it, man? It's half of a full work day in one movie.
It took me 9 hours to watch this 4-hour movie.
Oh, a work day through your lunch break with a little overtime. It's like, can you just stay and finish this up?
Yeah.
What do you have, Brian? Do you have any qualifiers on the is it worth your time? Is there anyone, let's say, beyond the general audience where you kind of go, you may not like it, but I think you should watch it anyway?
Well, as a person who just as a movie fan, not just a film critic, but as a movie fan, I love director's cuts. I love extended cuts. I love deleted scenes. I'm a Blu-ray guy, so I like having director's commentary. I love long form storytelling like that. And it took me 9 hours to watch a 4-hour movie. And it took 9 hours because I fell asleep 3 times in the first 45 minutes. So, and I wasn't tired. Like I watched it, like I started watching at dinner time, got up, walked around. I kept falling asleep.
You drifted off.
It's yeah. And then like I wake up and be like, whoa. And then like I look up and I hit pause and like 20 minutes have passed. So I'm like, rewind. It's just, there are movies that can make a lot out of the extra runtime. And he was very efficient with the extra use of runtime in some ways, in terms of filling out stories and motivations and all that kind of stuff. But it was just it wasn't fun.
So, like, and the short version is,
yeah.
Like,
yes.
Is there anyone you could recommend it to beyond the general audience? Like,
yeah, and sorry, my explanation was going on a Snyder cut of its own. But as someone who loves long form, even I didn't find the extra time all that useful. It wasn't completely wasted, but it really didn't benefit the experience of watching the film.
You bet. How does this sound? I think I know where you're going. How does this sound? It may be, never mind me, acting like some martyr, taking this upon myself. I think even if I wasn't doing, I will bear your burden, brother. I think I would have watched it much like you did. And so maybe for those folks out there that they're film fans, they may not be a Zack Snyder fan, but if they watched the first one, the theatrical cut, yeah, I think I'd actually say, you know what, dig in, get it done, because then there's stuff in here you can actually see a unified vision. And then you really do know what was going on. You get to pass judgment on it all. I think that very small group, I would not, if somebody said, go see it for that reason, and I watched and went, boy, that was a long, hard slog, I wouldn't be mad at the person who said to watch it for those reasons. How does that sound? Or maybe you're not even like, oh, not even that far. It's just too long. It's too much.
Well, yeah, I as far as blaming someone for recommending that they watch it, yeah, I mean, if you're going based off of someone else's recommendation, I would say judge whether you want to take their recommendation on whether they're a huge Zack Snyder fan and whether they like that darkness, that angsty kind of filmmaking. I love Zack Snyder's 300. I like what he tried to do intellectually with The Watchmen. This and everything he's done with the DCEU, I don't think is true to the characters. So that's part of why I don't like this. But okay. The recommendation, though, to watch it, I would say judge your conversations with that person that recommends it with your own taste and use that to judge whether you should watch it or not.
No, that's perfect. And you've even set us up to get a little deeper. So, yes, folks, from this point on, let us make sure you understand we're in the spoiler zone now. Everything past this point, we will be talking about it as though you've seen it. And so don't be shocked when I didn't know it was going to turn out that way. Actually, even if you haven't seen it, you go, I didn't know it was going to turn out that way. It's like, come on, it's a superhero movie. There's very limited paths it can take, even with Zack Snyder.
And it's a superhero movie that came out 4 years ago, last decade.
Yeah, they did do some radical twist. What do you mean Lois Lane's the bad guy the whole time? She was like a puppet. She was the puppet master. Her and Martha Kent.
Why do you say that name? Sorry, wrong. Wrong Zack Snyder movie.
All right.
Save Martha.
Save Martha. All right, let's talk about let's start with the sound. Yeah, what do you got? Three highlight thoughts you can share on the whole sound, whether it be the soundtrack or the soundscape, the sound. Yeah, like what's your thinking on how he built this auditorily?
Well, there was a lot of, as far as like differences between the original Justice League and the Snyder cut, music-wise. There was a very slow, very, as you say, a very slog. It was such a slow, melancholy type music. It was slow, it was emo, it was so many different pop songs that I've never heard of, and yet somehow bring you down and make you even more depressed when you weren't depressed to start with. And I realized that's sort of some of the tone with Zack Snyder and the Justice League and his take on these characters, on these DC Comics characters. But, and I know, and obviously too, some of this is because, I mean, $70 million sounds like a lot of movie, but when you're talking about new special effects, new CGI, all that kind of stuff, and a new runtime, you have, are you going to go back and pay a composer for all this, or do you just have someone go get all these different songs and use that to help set the tone? I am not a fan of the song choices that he had. I mean, I do think they fit the tone of the movie, but as far as sound goes, he used a lot of music to fill in the gaps between scenes, between dialogue, to really bring down the tone of this film, especially in the first half.
Yeah. What did you like? So one word that came to mind, I wonder if this fits what you're talking about, Brian. One of the words that came to mind as you were getting into it was ponderous. It's certainly, that's the way it felt to me. But does that also jive with what you're saying?
That is a great SAT word, and it's voluminous and it's auditorial. I'm losing my thought here.
And thuddy.
It's lots of multi-syllable words. Yes, it is. What was the question?
No, I'm like you're the way you're describing sound. The word that occurred to me was ponderous. It's a ponderous sound. Especially some of the sound, the music cues. Whenever Wonder Woman's on screen, we get that weird kind of choiry, but it's ponderous, it's heavy, it's plodding, it's kind of a thuddy sort of hear me now.
Well, and the Wonder Woman sound was completely unique in and of itself, in that very weird choir kind of a thing. But I would say more of it, at least in the first half of the movie, was just the song, the pop song choices that they had, like Lois Lane going to get coffee. There's a pop song playing. There's pop songs playing throughout that aren't very poppy, that are very self-reflective. They're slower, less beats per minute.
Like
slower.
You said, emo.
Yeah, very emo. And even starting off with the first scene where Bruce Wayne goes to recruit Aquaman. Why is there an Icelandic choir randomly breaking into a diegetic kind of a thing while one of them sniffs his sweater? And that's after the death yells heard around the world from the very end of BVS, starting off this film. So, yeah, the sound design, in terms of music choice, I think filled in a lot of gaps and helped bring down the budget some, as opposed to having to go back and redo a brand new score or fit the score from the original or create a brand new score. I think that's part of the challenge, because it did fit with what Zack Snyder was trying to do, but I don't think it worked in terms of overall keeping an audience's interest or telling the story.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. First of all, and this is the definition of ponderous: slow and clumsy because of great weight. And I think that's what you're describing here in the soundtrack. It's certainly what I heard. You know, just nothing subtle about his music cues at all in the whole thing. And what you said about emo. Oh, go ahead.
That definition sounds like Donald Trump trying to go to the fridge in the middle of the night.
Well, much like the soundtrack, I think. Like, it's just always very obvious and slow. It's if it's used for pacing purposes, it's to make sure that we sit in a moment, you know, a whole bunch of moments. But that's, let's say we can get into that more in the storytelling or in the story aspect of this. But okay, I got a better idea of where you're coming from. That makes sense to me. I have nothing much other than ponderous to add to that conversation. Maybe, and want to make sure I understand what you're saying. I remember I think it came from the YouTuber Sideways, who does a lot of music commentary and movie soundtrack commentary. And he's talking about, or maybe it's Patrick Willems, one of these folks, and how cheap pop music can be as for soundtrack. Like, that it actually is a cheap way, as long as you're not paying for big, like the really obvious ones. I watched Thor Ragnarok almost like to cleanse my palate the other day. It's like, I want to watch how this is done well. And they've got, is it the Immigrant Song? They've got a couple of needle drops from that right at the beginning and right at the end. I'm sure that cost them serious dough. But there's a pop song used effectively to just kind of crank up the speed right when you need it. It gets you into the music video part of that big action sequence. We've had some plot. We've advanced the plot a bit. We've had a bit more of the characterizations and everything. Then all of a sudden, let's get to action. We got this big pop song needle drop. And in this one, it's all these, pop songs you've never heard of. And it's a cheap way of, well, we'll just buy. And you're right, that's $70 million. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I'm not saying it's a cheap way of doing it. I am saying, though, that like any plot device or like any sort of storytelling device, if you're not using it properly, it doesn't hit home as well. If you're looking, I mean, for example, Guardians of the Galaxy used a ton of pop songs. I mean, especially from the 70s and 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Very effectively. So I'm not bagging on using pop songs, especially, you use it like sound up and then sound down and do a voiceover over it. But the songs they chose were all very slow. They were all very self-reflective, very melancholy, very, very emo. And it was just one after another of these character building scenes that filled in a lot of gaps that were there in the original Justice League, but didn't really add to the energy, didn't really add to an overall story arc. It just sort of was there. Specifically, Lois Lane going to get coffee.
Yeah,
as one of the first scenes in the entire film, and we get Lois Lane ordering coffee and having almost no dialogue, no real epiphany, no character. Not moving the story forward, not moving her character forward. She's just in mourning, and we see that. We see it's a long scene,
and it's an unearned moment. It's strictly her walking with the song and rain, sad, without any setup to it. I agree. So, okay, I got a better idea of what you're thinking about for sound, though, so let's move on.
Slight disagree on the unearned, because they did have the two previous movies, so the relationship between Amy Adams
I gotta
and
still
Henry
say
Cavill,
unearned. So you got to set up or you move it to the very beginning of the movie and you make it about her. Like but we're getting into a debate that I didn't want to get into, and we're talking about story and not about the sound. So I'm cutting it here. Let's move on to look, unless you have something to add regarding sound.
No.
Okay. All right. Let's get into the look, man.
Ooh, man, 4:3, standard def type aspect ratio. I get what everyone else is zigging and going anamorphic and 2.58 or more and more wide aspect ratios. Sometimes the idea is to zig when everyone else is zagging, but it's Justice League. It is not just Superman. It's not just Batman. It is all of these iconic DC characters coming together for the first time on the big screen with people in a live action film. And you're going 4:3. That's just the start of it. The desaturated color schemes, the CGI. The CGI, while a generation newer or a generation past the one from the previous film, it still is not photorealistic. It still doesn't look very good. All of that together, the visual experience of it. Oh, and the fact that it was a rated R film, I don't think they really used the R rating properly in this case. There's a lot of blood splatter against the wall as you throw the parademons up against the wall. To me, it didn't, and I love Deadpool. I love what they did with Deadpool. I love making it cartoonish and all that kind of stuff. I don't think, though, that fits with the tone of this film to just go R for the sake of going R and having all those desaturated blood colors up against the wall. It just, especially desaturated blood from parademons that are CGI characters anyway. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. If anything, it seemed like a cheap excuse to justify having an R rating.
Do you think the reason they got the R rating wasn't necessarily that, but I'm thinking of the Wonder Woman scene early on where she's thrown around the terrorists, and there's a lot of that blood spatter there where it's actual human beings, and maybe that's what pushed them over the edge, or you think it was all of it?
I think it's probably one of those things where if they decided, because most superhero movies now are PG-13 nowadays, and they do that so that they can they push the envelope, but there's studies out there that show that if you go from PG-13 to rated R, you lose like 70% of your audience, just because especially with superhero films where so many people are kids or teenagers. If you go,
where's the family? Yeah.
So if you're gonna make the decision to go R, you don't just want to have one extra F word in there. You want to fully utilize the R rating. If you're going to go R, you might as well go full R. With good taste, but still like not editing oneself in the process. And I think if you're the CGI department and you're making a new CGI model for the parademons anyway, why not throw a digital blood, splatter outlet or outline? When Batman throws a parademon against the wall, there's a giant Jackson Pollock CGI blood splatter for the CGI character. And so that's what I think it was. I think it was them saying, all right, if we're going to make this a rated R film, let's go full R.
I'm also thinking, though, because some of these choices are all made this year with COVID. Was it also, it's like, how much of this is actually going to see the inside of a theater anyway? Go ahead.
Well, I think because, we're in this time now where not just with COVID, but with the launch of all of these streaming services, I think what most of these companies trying to follow on the Netflix model are doing is they're realizing that, yes, we have all these great movies in our portfolio, and sure, we put them up on online streaming, wherever, but you have to have exclusive content to that medium to get people to go beyond the trial, to really subscribe. You have to have some content that you get there with whatever streaming service it is that you don't get somewhere else. If you want to see WandaVision, you have to get Disney Plus. You can't just go to the theater and buy it once. You got to get the subscription to Disney Plus. If you want to watch the Snyder Cut, you got to get HBO Max. And in that regard, if you're talking about putting out a new version of a 4-year-old movie, $70 million may sound like a lot of money, but it's really not if you're talking about putting out a brand new theatrical release. And really, if you look at the cost of putting together a streaming show in general, $70 million is actually not a whole lot of money versus probably what they spent on the flight attendant, the Kaylee Cuoco show, I'm guessing.
Yeah. That number sticks in my brain because that is the number that it cost Netflix to make the Charlize Theron, The Old Guard, which I actually, but the hot take in our discussion of that, Jim and I's discussion, was I was like, somebody owes Netflix $50 million because we did not see a $70 million film in that. Coming back to what you're saying, so are you saying that this movie doesn't look like, it's got to be, by the time you add up old footage, some reshoots, because they did do some reshoots, they did do some tacked on scenes, you can tell it's like, that's an older Ben Affleck. That is not the Ben Affleck of 5-6 years ago. Does it look like the 300 or trying to think of total production cost, adjust for inflation, maybe $400 million picture now?
Oh gosh, I don't know what the original budget was for the 2017 Justice League. I imagine it was 200 or 300 or 400 million. I'm guessing just off the top of my head. But obviously, it's a tentpole movie. It's Justice League. It's Warner Brothers. It's DC Comics. Of course, they spent a lot of money. Where I think they
estimation was 300 million.
Okay, so it's a third again as much, almost a third, probably 25% as much adding to the cost. But you're also getting all this attention and people signing up for HBO Max, so that probably makes a lot of sense business-wise, I guess.
I'm more want to circle back. Like, does it look like a $370 million picture?
Yes and no. I think that CGI looks very cheap in general, not just because of that, but to me, unless it's Christopher Nolan, I am not a fan of CGI in general. It's a reality of the business.
Reasonable qualifier, yeah.
And look, CGI, it's there. I think it's also kind of lazy filmmaking because there's a reason why they just jokingly say, "Oh, we'll fix it in post." I think CGI can do a lot of things, but I think CGI characters are not photorealistic. I thought the CGI characters, especially Steppenwolf, looked like a PS2 cutscene in Justice League, and that's not a good thing because PS2 came out in the early 2000s. This is a 2017 movie. I think the redesigned Steppenwolf, clearly they went back to Ground Zero and redesigned him. And it looks like a generation newer, but now it looks like a PS3 game cutscene character for a 2021 film. So it still looks 15 years behind the times. I do think the Parademons look better. I think most of the new CGI was on the Parademons, on Steppenwolf, on the new bad guy characters, and then obviously they redid Cyborg a little bit as well. I do think most of the backgrounds and cityscape looked exactly the same. So I don't know if they tweaked it at all, but it looked pretty much like it did before, at least in terms of set extensions and cityscape.
Okay. And could you, like, for me, it has the look of a Zack Snyder film. Like it or not, at no time did I go, who is this? What aesthetic is this? I've never seen such a thing. It's like, this is every Zack Snyder movie ever, in that dark, desaturated, overly stylized, or not over. I'll take out the pejorative for a second. It's stylized. He's a visual stylist, and so in that case, would you agree that we got the same thing? We got his style in every frame.
His fingerprints are all over this film. I will say I don't think it is full Zack Snyder in terms of the visual aesthetic. I think the full Zack Snyder would be 300 and something much. And because it's DC, I think he kind of dials it back a little bit, like a hair.
He's constrained to a degree by the subject matter. Like, he can't. Superman has to wear a cape. Do you know the distinction? I think that's the distinction you're making is, yeah, he's constrained by the subject matter. You're absolutely right. The original product, or based on a graphic novel in one case, but his originals were, but I don't know, actually, I'm thinking about his take on Dawn of the Dead, which is another like almost a reverse of the original film. Super dark, very moody, where I'd say Dawn of the Dead had a kind of lighter comic satire vibe to its imagery. Some of it due to budget, I'm sure. Shoot it with a zoom lens. Lots of light. Everyone will stay in focus. It won't matter. We're not getting RD deep focus. We're just making sure that everyone's in focus because we can't afford any more film stock. We're going to get this in
it's not a 30-second rack focus, for sure.
Yeah.
I did not see Dawn of the Dead, so I can't speak to that
okay.
As far as this.
But maybe I should say, yeah, I like the way you put it. Fingerprints on every frame. It's definitely a unified look now, and it's a Zack Snyder look. It may not be full 11, full volume Zack Snyder, because he is constrained by the medium or by the content, by the certain assumptions his audience is going to have about superhero movies and the DCU. Would that be a fair capture?
Yeah, and now I'm just thinking about turning it all the way up to 11. I'm just thinking of the whole, like Rob Reiner's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but cool. Yes, yeah.
All right. Let's move on from the luck. Let's talk about the performances. Anything? I could go first.
Go for it.
They're all fine, given what little they have to do. They're all gods. They present themselves as gods. They're very, this is important. Oh, our struggle. Oh, our pain. No one understands us. We're all rejected by society. I don't think, this is not a knock on any of the performers. They are so limited, and I don't mean limited like, well, no, they're so limited in what they can do, not just by the constraints of being a superhero, but Zack Snyder's vision of what a superhero is, and by the sheer, the limitations of the production. Here, we are from one set piece to another, to another, to another. There's not a lot. Most of the performance actually is almost in the way the look and the sound is. Like, I don't think Amy Adams got a lot of deep direction and a lot of notes between her and Zack Snyder in that walk you referred to earlier. That's like, here, take this, look sad. Here's the coffee you're going to carry to the cop. Like, it's not like she's, like we're not seeing, there's very few close-ups. It's a lot of medium shots. And if there are close-ups, it's in a key moment that is almost completely governed by CGI. Like, so they're very here. This is where we zoom in on you. There's a hot dog flying by. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not sure. There's not a lot to say about these performances. They're stock characters in an opera, And so they all did fine given what they're allowed to do at all.
Well, what's one of those sayings about acting? It's not just acting; it's reacting when you're in a scene with a scene partner, and that's really hard to do if your scene partner's not there because it's a big budget Hollywood film and they're off in the trailer somewhere, and it's 5 years later.
Or you're reacting to a green screen behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where the monster is. Be frightened.
It's a tennis ball on a stick. No. I think, I don't think anyone in any, even if it's a Marvel movie, I don't think Robert Downey Jr. is not going to get an Oscar nomination for playing Tony Stark Iron Man. It's just, that's not what you get out of a superhero film. But when you look at the performances from Henry Cavill, from Ben Affleck, from all of the principals, from Gal Gadot, I think it's okay. I think Gal Gadot's probably the best out of all these. Her accent even influenced the Amazonians on Themyscira accent. In as far as the portrayal of Amazonians in this film. The one that I did not like his acting was I'm brain farting, but the guy playing the Flash, playing Barry Allen. And maybe that's a little bit unfair because I'm a huge fan of the Flash TV show.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they do a great job on that show nailing who the Flash is. I'm not a comic book reader, but everything,
Ezra Miller.
Yes, Ezra Miller. And I like Ezra Miller and different things, Perks of Being a Wallflower, a bunch of other stuff. I don't like his Barry Allen, though. The whole quirky, socially awkward thing, okay, maybe, but that's more of like a teenage Barry Allen, I think, than a guy who's about to go work in a crime lab, who's theoretically post-college. I don't think this works as well. The creepy face thing that he was doing with Iris when she's upside down in slow motion with CGI hot dogs. Everything about his performance I'm just not a huge fan of. I don't dislike Ezra Miller. I just don't like his performance in this. And it kind of stands out because he's supposed to be a little bit of the comic relief, and most of what he does isn't really all that funny. And to be fair, that might be the editors, that might be Zack Snyder, but I don't think that is the one character that really stands out as not landing, especially in a comedic way.
Yeah. No, understand completely. I liked him a little more than you did, but I see where I could totally understand how a lot of people out there would be, no, I'm with Brian on that one, not buying what Ezra's selling. So do you think that some of his performance can be chalked up to direction? And the reason I say that is, unlike even a Henry Cavill, but unlike a Ben Affleck or Henry Cavill, where they've got a little more pull, and their ability to say, yeah, Zach, I just don't feel right about saying it that way. Snyder's going to at least have to negotiate a little with him. And I'm not saying that Ezra Miller, when he was shooting this, was nobody, but he was definitely one of the younger people, not a big name. Gal Gadot, another one where it's not like at the time it was shot, she wasn't Wonder Woman yet. We were starting to see, but later on it's like, oh, we just got to accept it because now she's the original Wonder Woman movie makes her a superstar that everyone will just, she'll be able to say, Zach, I'm not comfortable with that. I kind of brambled there. Would you allow that some of whatever their performance strengths or weaknesses for any of them, including Ezra Miller, were just Zach going, and this is what you're going to do. Stroke her hair. Well, maybe not like stroke her hair. That's a terrible characterization, but.
Well, okay, let's put it this way. I think if you are the comic relief character in a film like this that is a more serious tone, I think that is much harder to do, knowing that it's a Zack Snyder film. And you're right, being a younger character as well, younger actor as Ezra Miller is, it's harder to find that right point. But ultimately, it's a director's medium and an editor's medium, and you know, especially if it's not really clear what that comic tone is going to be. You know, how many different takes you get, and then which take are they going to use? As an actor, you don't have any control over that. So you only really have control over what you do in camera, and then even then, like you said, he's the younger, has less gravitas, has less say and pull in the industry. So yeah, I'm sure Ben Affleck probably could say, no, I'm not saying that. That sounds stupid. Why would I say it?
And just plain refuse to.
Right.
I like what you said, though, about the tone of the film. And so how do you handle humor in the tone of the film? Especially, Zack Snyder's just not known for that. No one looks back at his films and goes, remember that great tension-breaking comedy in 300? It's like, well, what are you talking about? What movie was that? Which director's cut are you referring to? Did an outtake accidentally slip into the film? So I think that's a great point you make there. And
yeah, it's not like Albert Brooks just sort of wanders onto the set of 300 and like goes full Albert Brooks.
All right, we got to punch this up. We're going to make this work. We got to get people laughing in the cheap seats. All right. Okay, I think that's about all we can do as far as the performances go. And again, I think we both agree that there just isn't that much for an actor to really. They have to embody the superhero. There may be some sort of character arc, but it's so much harder to do even with 4 hours. Like, you're really just filling in backstory and stuff, and we'll get more into that in our next subject. But the performances are all pretty good because it is a real movie, and schmucks don't get those roles. But beyond that, it comes down to almost like you're saying about Ezra Miller, not your cup of tea, doesn't fit your idea of the characterization of the Flash.
And part of the problem with that, too, is that both Flash and Cyborg have such huge chunks of this movie dedicated to their origin story. The very fact that the DCU and Warner Brothers try to push through a Justice League movie before they'd earned that gravitas of the characters on the screen in a solo movie, like the MCU did. MCU did all origin stories and then did the Avengers. Everything about the way that Warner Brothers and they've run things with the DCU seems to be in reaction to trying to keep up with the MCU. Yeah. So I think in that respect, it's not Ezra Miller's fault.
Yeah.
Especially Cyborg's character really, really suffered with the original release, and then obviously Joss Whedon and some of that stuff. But yeah, I think it's harder to do that when you don't know the characters as well.
No, yes. What you said.
By the way, what do you think was the best acting character portrayal of this film?
The best? I've said before, I didn't mind Ezra Miller's shtick. Partly, I want to see one of my, in general, problems of Zack Snyder's filmography is there's no joy. There's no, I like a couple of laughs. I want to see someone who's trying to live in the real world as well. And that will get more of a criticism. I'll expand on those ideas when we get into story. And that said, the one thing I would have liked to have seen I think we talked about this a bit in our first go round on this subject. I really would have, by the end of this movie, I really wouldn't mind have seen a Ben Affleck Batman. We only got so little. I just would have loved to see him fighting crime in Gotham. I just wouldn't mind have seen his take on it, his take on that world. And
other than a slow cameo in Suicide Squad, we really didn't get that at all.
No, even Batman versus Superman, we didn't get it. Like we get this, it just a standalone Ben Affleck Batman. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I'm not sure I would have liked it. Maybe, still keep an open mind. I might have hated it, might have loved it. I just thought it's like, I wouldn't mind seeing what he could have done with it. He's a thespian. I would have liked to have seen that. He's a thespian with a superhero that has moral gray, has an arc, all those things. I would have liked to have seen that. You get a couple of interesting scenes where it's like, geez, there's something there. So, but can I say it's the best performance? Everyone was doing the best with what they got. There was some nice moments. I really enjoyed the scene where Jason Momoa says regarding Cyborg, just says to Ezra Miller's The Flash, this sucks. He's getting jerked around. His father just died, and we're going to send him on a suicide mission. That paraphrasing a little there. I bought what he was selling there. I was totally convinced that this is a real person saying this real thing, and it was a human moment where it's a guy recognizing that somebody else is getting a raw deal. I really enjoyed that moment, and I think every character had those. Every now and then they got a moment to be a human being, and those are the only times I kind of perked up in the whole thing. So, but yeah, a favorite one. The short answer to your question, and where we'll cut to in the actual edited version, is no favorites. They all had their moments. There's the answer. All right, my friend, let's keep it moving. I'm still gonna have to get pretty heavy with the snips in the edit, but we are making progress. Okay,
Absolutely.
The story. What? Yeah. Testify, brother.
Well, if you were wanting to watch Zack Snyder's Justice League, the Snyder Cut, for a different story, or a better story, or a better version of the story, you're probably going to be disappointed. It's the same story. It's the story of three mother boxes coming together to be the unity for the bad guys, and trying to get the Justice League together to stop them from becoming the Unity. For anyone that's a Star Trek fan, the Unity is basically like the Genesis device from Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. It creates by destroying. Whatever is there, it destroys it and uses it to make whatever it's programmed to make. Same basic story as the original film, but I will say they did clarify the storytelling with this a lot better this time around as to what the character motivations were, and they filled in a lot of the story in the same way that the ultimate cut of BS made a lot more sense, but I don't think it really improved it. It did clarify it, but it did not improve it. It's the same basic story. It's a continuation of, and it's a teaser for sequels. It does bring in extra characters, but it's not fun. The story is it's not as complicated as you might think, but they overcomplicate the things that shouldn't be as complicated as they are.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to what you're saying there is, and I think other folks have gotten caught in this trap. The story is better than the theatrical cut in that they fill in some, not necessarily plot holes, but character motivations, character background. They allow for a little more information, so you at least at every point in the story, you know where you are. Everything that's come before it has led to that point, and it leads to further points. That would be its biggest improvement over the theatrical cut. Is it yeah, we're getting a little more information. It all makes more sense. I think and this is where we can now argue about the thing I will have for you viewers already cut out. Is I think the fundamental problem with Zack Snyder's storytelling comes down into a few areas, and one of his unearned moments. It's always just a whole bunch of mechanics to lead up to a moment, to do it as the Ryan George. He does that Screen Rant pitch, the pitch meetings.
It's great. By the way, his pitch meeting for the Snyder Cut is brilliant.
I will put a link to it up here. Yes, you're absolutely right. And I love the way he really captures his storytelling. It won't make any sense, but it'll look cool. And I think that is Snyder's kind of way of telling stories. It's moving from one set piece to another and having these moments where everything slows down and the music swells and big light, or, but it just feels unearned because it was only the mechanics that got us there. It's strictly the plot that got us to the moment, not actually okay, we've had a few scenes and now and I'll go back to Thor Ragnarok, which has a couple of killer moments that were earned, that we're getting set up for it. And all of a sudden when the Immigrant Song kicks in the last basically boss battle where he flies in on lightning, you're like, this is the best I've seen ever. You're totally caught up in the moment, right? It is an earned moment. It should be slow-mo. He has finally fulfilled his character arc. He has become the God of Thunder. He keeps saying he is, but this is the moment he is the God of Thunder. He is flying in on lightning. Mwah! Chef's kiss. Whereas, I would argue, this guy, it's a whole bunch of moments, but we never get a chance to kind of get it earned and then really be in it. That's my criticism of his story. There is my take on his weakness as a storyteller.
Yeah, he is a master of visuals, and he's a competent filmmaker. But he doesn't have a whole lot of character development, and the story is very basic, and it doesn't jump off the screen. If you look at Steven Spielberg, for example, Steven Spielberg is also a master of getting that one shot, that key shot in his brain, that 4 or 5 of them. And Steven Spielberg has said that you have those 4 or 5 shots of the iconic shots, and you work your way into them and you work your way out of them, and that's how we built the scene. And then injecting personality and comedy in there as well. Zack Snyder, though, doesn't seem to do that as much.
Doesn't do the other stuff that sets up the moment.
Yeah, there's not as much dynamic range in terms of characters. It's all very sullen. It's all very down. There's not a dynamic range of emotion. There's not really a journey that these characters go on.
Yeah,
they just sort of they're there in the plot. They eventually come together. I do think he did a better job of getting a group dynamic going with the 3 or 4 scenes where the Justice League members are kind of working together.
Yeah.
Then in the theatrical release, especially in the airplane hangar scene, the theatrical cut of that scene versus this one is completely different, and this one makes a lot more sense. But I still think it goes a long way to matching what the Avengers did in terms of character dynamics and having those discussions, because that's part of the great thing about team-up superhero movies is you get the different points of view and the philosophical, the strategic debates on the best way to do these things. Who takes charge? What's the moral, ethical thing to do? What's the most practical thing to do? And that's some of what's fun about these team-up movies, and we don't really have a lot of that in this film. The most
human parts of these movies are when they're working their shit out.
Yeah.
interpersonally, absolutely. And it almost always, those moments kind of set up the real themes of the movie. In a way, there is I'm thinking of the first Avengers, not the first Avenger, the first Avengers with Iron Man, etc.
Marvel's The Avengers. Avengers 1.
Thank you very much. Avengers 1. Where they have that argument and they're having those, get a group of guys in a room and watch them have a pissing match. But they're also kind of, each character is stating the worldview. And they're also kind of sort of giving us a tell on one of the further conflicts they're going to have throughout this, how they're being manipulated by S.H.I.E.L.D. Is S.H.I.E.L.D., how good can S.H.I.E.L.D. be if they keep so many secrets? These things that they keep exploring throughout the Avengers and Captain America. You could almost say that's a big chunk of Captain America's arc as a human being and his growth and everything. And yes, I agree with you. It's not just a great comic book moment. It's a great storytelling moment. And here we get glimpses of what a Justice League could have been, I think. Maybe that's... Okay, maybe I'm giving it I'm being too heavy on what it could have been. We don't get enough of that for us to really say, wow, what great storytelling. We're kind of going, well, that's minimal storytelling.
Well, and part of that is because just with what happened with Batman versus Superman is dead until 2 hours and 30 minutes into this film. So if you're having a Justice League debate, especially including morality and strategy, you don't have the strongest character there. You don't have the original superhero there. The character has been there since 1938. He's not there to have those discussions. He is the subject of the discussions, but he's not there because he's dead, and they're debating whether or not to bring him back from the dead.
They don't have the lawful good, to put this in a D&D term. They don't have the lawful good paladin there going, we can't do that. And you've got chaotic good Batman sort of being the other extreme, kind of going, listen, sometimes you gotta make an omelet, you gotta break some eggs. That's a great point. Yeah. Without him, without one pole, it's all lopsided.
Yeah, because I think without that Superman voice, that conscious of the group, the Boy Scout of the group, I think Jason Momoa does a great job with Aquaman, and I think if Zack Snyder had his druthers, he would probably just clone Jason Momoa and have a whole bunch of Jason Momoas playing every character. As far as like a Zack Snyder type feel to it. Yeah. But as far as like a balance, you have
certainly the packs.
Yeah, I mean, because look, you have a brooding Batman, you have a geeky but not funny and doesn't quite fit in socially with any group, Flash. You have Cyborg, who's barely human anymore. You have a guy in Aquaman who doesn't yet fit into Atlantis even, because this is pre-Aquaman, the solo movie. So you have a guy who doesn't fit. He's of two worlds, but doesn't fit into either.
Yeah.
And then you have Diana, Wonder Woman, who's 5,000 years old, who's been in the world of man for 80, 100 years. And she's like, all these guys are arguing and whatever. So, this is, it's not exactly the Algonquin round table of debate between superheroes that it could be if Superman is there to unite, bring people together. He is, Superman can largely be like the social glue that brings the Justice League together, and because he's not there, it's harder for them to come together, I think.
I'm gonna, you make a couple of excellent points, and I think it's almost a perfect bridge into talking about the meaning of this movie, like some of its themes, like what's being said here, and this is, So I'm going to hook over to that, because one of the things we miss in that first argument, because correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding of a lot of these team ups, even the Fantastic Four, it's kind of a standard. There's friction within the group. They kind of push themselves through to go fight the bad guy, but because they're not unified, it doesn't work out. Then they have to come back and go, okay, we gotta strip ourselves of our bullshit and do what is right, regardless of how this plays out too. And so there's always kind of a moral component in these conflicts. And something you mentioned, something you mentioned kind of reminds me, they're not actually having a moral conversation about bringing back Superman. It is only really, strip it all away, it's only, are they taking to, it's about risk. It's we need him come back, but it may really blow up in our face. That's a gambling decision, not a moral one. They're not going, no, there's no character there going, you know what? Although Jason Momoa's Aquaman did say something to the effect that you don't really get the idea coming out of that, the conflict being, should we do this at all? Never mind the risk. Is it morally right? The guy's dead. Can we just leave him in the ground? Let him be at peace.
That was one of the big differences between the theatrical release and this release, because that was the conversation in the airplane hangar. Mm-hmm. After they come back from losing the mother box and the air vent thing in the theatrical release. In this one, the
there's a bit of morals. Yeah. There's do we do it or not? Will this blow up? How big a gamble are we taking here? We have to take the gamble, or we shouldn't. And it's almost guaranteed. Of course, they're going to take the gamble, because it's established that they're going to lose no matter what. That they're not going to be able to hold him back from the last mother box. Okay. Well, with that there, I'm wondering, and correct me if I'm wrong, the impression I got from you when we first went over this ground in the unreleased, never to be released original chat,
in the Christensen cut of the Snyder cut.
It is Christensen cut of our deep dive on the Snyder cut. Yes, the hashtag that we would need both our frames wide. Did I get you right in that Snyder? There really actually isn't a lot of meaning. I think the language you use is messaging, but I'm talking more about the themes. When I say meaning, it doesn't necessarily mean, hey, kids, don't be racist. Do you know what I mean? Is that like that? It's just something he's not interested in either, or did I misunderstand you?
I don't really see a whole lot of messaging in that regard, meaning in that regard. I don't think there's a ton of kids do the right thing, good over evil, rights for any group sort of thing. I don't think there's anything along those lines. It's bad guys trying to destroy the world. There's no real moral imperative about bad guys. Yeah, I mean, there's no real political message there. I do think they did a much better job this time of explaining the motivations of the bad guy characters, or at least having over-the-top Shakespearean type.
At least Steppenwolf had a motivation. He wants to go home.
Yes, because 50,000 worlds isn't enough. With over-the-top Shakespearean, like the only thing missing was holding up a Macbeth kind of a skull sort of thing.
The skull, yeah.
But yeah, I didn't see a ton of messaging in here. Not heavy-handed, at least. It's a superhero film. It's not. Yeah. It's not trying to change the world. It's trying to remake the world, but not really change the world.
Witty. For myself, and this is one of the things I always struggle with Zack Snyder's films, I think he does actually have, I think he actually has some pretty clear and, dare I say it, like I think he's got a very clear worldview. I think in some ways he hides it, and in some ways they're constrained. So in this film, they're constrained in that all superhero movies in the end are crime movies. There's a bad guy that's got to be caught or stopped, period. And so there's not a lot. So you're constrained in that way. I think, and in some of those assumptions, there's a certain subtext. There's not a lot of room for it in that kind of Manichaean sort of, there's good and there's evil. And these guys are so obviously on the side of good. You know, these are the ones to root for. Those guys, those others are, you know, the bad guys. That's who we got to be against. But I do think in his, and this is where I'd say he does have, whether it be conscious in his brain or we're just seeing the results of it, there is this weird message, but a theme of humanity needs to be protected. And it's either going to be by gods or the super rich. Now that's always, and that's not just necessarily Zack Snyder, that's the message of the Dark Knight trilogy. Like in there, it's a little clearer, a little more obvious, but there's these, we have to have people that protect us from the chaos outside, from the dark forces outside. And I think that is something there, whether he intends it or not, there is kind of a message that it's like, you have no agency. So I think one of the unintended, like there's this weird message, like an overt message, what I think you'd call messaging in this film, and that is in the scene where Wonder Woman rescues everyone from the evil terrorists, and a little girl says, "Can I be like you?" And she says, "Princess, you can be anyone you want to be." Now, when we first talked about this, Brian, I was kind of you're a god. What are you telling this little girl? She can't be Wonder Woman. Give her some other message. But it's kind of overt messaging to the audience saying, oh, you know, I am an empowering image, like almost in an acknowledgement of how Wonder Woman is such a big deal with little girls and with parents of little girls who go, finally, a superhero my little girl can aspire to be. But here's the thing, that scene, and only after dawned on me, she outright murdered those guys. These aren't devil creatures, because there's kind of the moral impact of murder is sort of stripped away when they're demons with wings and so obviously look inhuman. These folks were human beings. I'm not saying that they didn't have it coming, but she just brutally kills them all in what I think was, I'm not as big a fan of the CGI in that scene where she's just moving throughout the whole thing like a maniac. And then instead of just disarming the last guy, she straight up blows him up, incinerates them in front of all these little girls. And here's one going, boy, I'd really love to murder me some terrorists. And I think, so other than that bit of, I actually think that's a perfect example of Zack Snyder isn't good at overt messaging. I don't think he cares about it. I agree with you. Like, it's not what he does, because you can be whatever you want is like so on the nose. No one would say that's good writing. It's one of those like, that's okay. That's the best you got. You know, at least in Wonder Woman in 1984, where another little girl looks at her all excited. She winks at her. Like, she acknowledges her. It's a nice little bit in what's otherwise not a movie I admire. But I think what we see in his I think it's a lot more conscious than we give him credit for, is superheroes, they are the pure arbiters of good and what's right and wrong, and there is no gray in his world, and bad guys get to die. And brutally so if required. In a scene that doesn't story-wise even make sense. Like, yeah, Ryan George, again, there'll be a card. It's like, well, what do you mean? Could they just add a bomb on a timer set to 0? Why do they have to delay the police? It doesn't make any sense. And I think that is where how does Ryan George put it? I need you to get off my back about it.
Super easy. Barely an inconvenience. Oh, really? We'll just have a ticking clock. Anyway,
so I think that's part of his meaning there. There is a theme of good versus evil that's overly simplistic, and that we need to be, because there's never the only human being, like normal human being, not a meta human, whatever label they put on the Flash, and the only ones that aren't created out of something godlike is Batman, and he's a rich guy. Otherwise, we don't see any normal human beings doing much of anything except waiting for Superman to fly them back to Kansas, or we don't see regular human beings just having agency in their defense. And to compare that to
Victor Stone's dad, Silas, has agency.
He is the guy who created, so he's the Daedalus of this group. He's got super intelligence. Even his agency is about creating a son and then protecting his son. Wouldn't you say?
Saving, because he brought him into this world and he's going to keep him in this world, I think he said.
But yeah, you're right. There is. My argument is not perfect. My model, like most models, is wrong. I find it useful in this, in talking about Zack Snyder. But to compare it against, say, Spider-Man, where there are times in Spider-Man movies, and it may be ridiculous and over the top, but he is friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. There's points where they're rigging, like he gets help from regular folks to achieve the big objective. And I can't remember which one it is, where all the building cranes kind of coordinate so that he can get to the boss battle in time, save everybody. There's an idea that these superheroes are in tune with the communities they serve. Whereas I think in Zack Snyder's world, these are, at best, the community has a kind of weird, we don't like you vibe. Like we see that in this movie where they're never really connected, or they're Icelandic and singing to him,
and smelling his sweater.
And it's Iceland in the modern era. There are cars there, helicopters, phones throughout the community. It's just so weird. But yeah, I think that's his worldview is represented in those areas. But I do agree with you. Yeah, he's not actually. I think it's one of those things where he loves the operatic, good, evil. These are good people, or these are not good. They're great, and therefore what they do is fine because they're great and they're trying to save the universe. I just find that kind of empty because there's no. They're hard to relate to, almost impossible to relate to. Spider-Man's a kid I can relate to.
Well, I think part of that too is, if you're talking Zack Snyder's worldview, I think it's pretty clear, just in the tone of his films, that he has a very pessimistic, very down, very depressing type of worldview. It's the difference between The Martian and The Revenant. It's it's equal amount of things go wrong, but you put Matt Damon in the leading role, and it's what can we do? Solve one problem and solve the next one, and hopefully at the end of the day,
chipping away.
Yes, The Revenant's all about what else can go wrong. It isn't just everything so sad.
Yeah,
and part of that too, it's tough because if Superman's up there, Superman is the light. He is the best of us. He is, the middle America, raised in Kansas on a farm. He is that bathing in the light of the funky, getting that funky high from the yellow sun, to quote the song.
Yeah.
But yeah, Zack Snyder's worldview in that regard is very sad. It's very pessimistic. It's slightly sarcastic. When Flash turns to Bruce Wayne and says, "What's your superpower?" He goes, "I'm rich."
Yeah.
I think Ben Affleck did a great job not making that sarcastic and making it funny. But it's still kind of. I think Ben Affleck did a great job with that move.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's the tone. It's his tone, and it's his film. So, am I a fan of that tone? No. And then harkening, also calling back to the Wonder Woman scene in the bank with the terrorists and the hostages. That scene is, you see that scene in pretty much every superhero film or team up film where you have, the character come in, make their entrance, and it's an introduction to the character. It's the character showing off their abilities, what they're good at, how they work. And I didn't have a problem, sort of the fog of war thing when she's going through and killing each terrorist, because that's sort of in the fog of war and trying to
straight up
people.
Murder.
But the last one, where it's the last guy and he's got the gun, she's so fast. They showed her abilities. She could have easily just gone straight forward, bum rushed him, and took the gun away. But she didn't do that. And honestly, too, with the explosion that happens with that last one, too, it kills the bad guy, but that's also putting the hostages at risk. So what's supposed to be the introduction to that character, who also is Diane, the paragon of virtue. You're right.
To quote Ryan George, it doesn't make any sense, but it looks cool.
Yeah.
I agree with you. There's that dark assumption about the world, and I think it's one of the real messages of this film is that the world is a dark and dangerous place, and there is a thin line between order and chaos. And that line is protected by a select, almost like a Gnostic idea of a select few who will keep that at bay, and that human beings, the community, are too wrapped up in our own BS. We don't understand how good we have it. We don't understand them, and therefore reject them. We don't truly. There may be a few. Icelanders apparently don't have a phone.
Small fishing village. Who knows?
Couldn't. Again. So just watched a movie about a truly hick village in Greenland where they did have the internet. Spotty connection at times, but they had the internet. Anyway,
part of that too is it's all A-level characters. You're not talking about any everyman characters, every man, every woman type characters on the ground level. If you look back at the Avengers, we had the Ashley Johnson, the youngest, the attic kid from Growing Pains. She was the waitress that sort of running around. They had the same thing in Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Well, even Clark Gregson as Agent, whatever the hell his name is. Agent Coulson. Thank you. He is more of a regular human being. Pepper Potts is a human being who pushes back and points out character flaws, which is, I think, part of the meaning that's going on here. There's just human beings throughout. Even the superheroes behave as human beings. Captain America's a great and amazing person who still has to write down pop culture references. That he's like, I get that reference, which is a great humanizing moment. These guys are not presented as human beings, except on the odd. I almost thought the scenes are accidental. And you're right, though, you pointed it out. They happen in the hangar when there's actually moments to be, like back at the clubhouse, moments to actually be human beings. And we see a couple of those. I just think we could have seen a lot more, but you're right. He's a moody, dark SOB who has a moody, dark, and in my opinion, elitist view of the world. And that view of between chaos and darkness. But that's just my opinion. More to be seen when I rank all Zack Snyder's films from least to most offensive. Stay tuned.
Part of that too is the fact that in a lot of superhero films, the love interest is the human voice, the voice of reason, the non-superpowered voice. And just thinking about the character lineup for Justice League, Superman's dead for 2 hours and 30 minutes. So Lois Lane is there, but she's not really the active love interest. Batman has no girlfriend in this film. Aquaman, Mira's there, but they're not really dating. Victor Stone, Cyborg, there's not really anything left of him to date. And they introduce Iris in passing, and he grabs a hot dog while he grabs her face, but there's no real love connection there yet. So really all of the Justice League characters in this film, there is no grounding love interest like there would be with the Avengers.
Nothing that connects them to the community. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's no Thor with there's none of them that ground them.
Yeah. Okay. Let's we're I still got a lot of cutting to do, but we're just about to the end. Let's talk about the director now. And I think it could be, I really just have one question here. Like, in a way, we've talked about Zack Snyder, the whole thing. It is Zack Snyder's Justice League. Here's my question for you. What do you think Zack Snyder's filmmaking legacy is? In 10 years or 20 years, you pick a time in the future, what do you think we're going to be saying about Zack Snyder?
I think that right now we're in the dark middle chapter. Obviously, he has a very dark aesthetic. He has he's a strong visual guy, but we're halfway through his career, or we're the dark middle chapter. He's overcoming personal tragedies, and that's bleeding into his filmmaking. And even before his personal tragedies, though, he was still a dark filmmaker.
Yeah, as opposed to his upbeat comic early years. Yeah,
exactly. And look, he's human, like every filmmaker is human, and some of that is going to bleed into your creative works. I don't think that should have, in this case, bled into a superhero film, but he is human, and he never really got to have his take at this. Obviously, I think it's a bit of a misnomer because he did have a full take on Man of Steel. He got a full take on Batman v Superman. Both of those were very dark.
And an ultimate cut.
Yeah, and an ultimate cut, and also very sloppy. I think Man of Steel actually was better than BVS, but it had the same problems as this film even before we got the Snyder cut. So I think across the board, Zack Snyder, he's a talented filmmaker. He is not illogical, but I think he gets a little bit too ambitious with plot and with story, and doesn't do as much storytelling, as much character development as that would make these jump off the page even more, off the screen even more. What do you think of Zack Snyder?
Well, for myself, I think in 20 years, let's say he never made another film again. I don't think that's going to happen. One of the great things for him is, and the Snyder Cut, and I'll release this, is it's what could have been, let's say, moving into a much lower rent part of his career, because that's usually what happens. You get a few kicks at the can, but then all of a sudden they kind of go, well, we're not risking another $200-300 million on you. You can do $50 to $100 million pictures, or you do a deal with a Netflix and you churn out some stuff for a while. He has become culturally relevant again. He has reestablished, if it was ever lost, and I kind of think it was, but that regardless of whether he lost it or not, he is definitely back to being an A-list director who can command. I can see him easily getting another big movie. But if he never was, even if he does, I think 20 years from now, they'll go, great visual stylist, definitely had a mood, definite auteur. Like, there's no mistaking this film for someone else's. There are some filmmakers where they're almost anti-auteurs. They really do kind of go, no, this fits this story, and I'm a servant of the story. I don't need to be seen in it. And so they make different kinds of movies based on different kinds of stories. You know what? He's more like Michael Bay, He's going to have his Schneiderisms. He's got and it's all so much look and operatic scope. And I think that's what people will say. I think a lot of the stuff you and I have touched upon is not going to change. We've in a way, I think we've captured who he is as a filmmaker. This is not to say that he couldn't change. I don't think he needs to. Like, he's got a market. He will get other gigs based on Zack Snyder. No studio's going to go, we didn't know it would be this dark. He's going to get jobs specifically, and he's going to get him on his terms. They're going to go, no, we're looking for the Zack Snyder vibe. All right. Well, I think we've said what needed to be said about Zack Snyder. Let's continue to talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League. It's time to get in. Let's wrap it up with our final thoughts. My friend, give me your last hot takes on this rather remarkable film.
Yeah, I liked what he tried to do. It's sort of an interesting film school example, this film. Going back 4 years later, getting $70 million, getting basically an unlimited runtime to tell a story that was, 2 hours roughly last time?
Yeah.
So I like some of the stuff they added. I like the including Darkseid and Desaad into a sort of Empire Strikes Back, talking over Darth Vader, talking with the Emperor over Skype, Zoom call, whatever you want to call that weird rock kind of conversation thing that they were having. Yeah. I liked that. I don't want to call it political, but a sort of inner power struggle, inner social dynamic of the bad guys. I like that we got a little bit more of the old school Lord of the Rings throwback when Diana was describing the mother box initially. I liked a lot of the stuff they added, but overall, just tonally, the tone of the film, it just didn't. It was more of the same of what I expected out of Zack Snyder redux of Justice League, and it didn't really add much new, much improvement, much better to what we already saw 4 years ago. I love superheroes. As far as films, I love superheroes, sci-fi, all that kind of stuff. And of the stuff that I love, the Super Friends, Justice League, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman are at the top, right up there with Luke Skywalker and Han Solo as some of my favorite characters. And he does none of them justice. He doesn't do justice to Justice League.
Witty wordplay, sir. That's a great one. That's a hashtag. There will be one under this.
Yeah.
For myself, Brian, I think of this. I'm not a Zack Snyder fan, so for anyone, who didn't get that by this point in our little chat here, yeah, I'm not a big fan of his. I am glad in a weird way I watched the full thing, because then I get both versions. And I do think this is a lot clearer. I have a much better idea of what Zack Snyder was trying to say with Justice League, what he was trying to do, what he was trying to accomplish. And that's not a bad thing. You want to know what the author was trying to tell me, was trying to show me. That said, yeah, it's just such a dark slog of a show. I kind of divvied it up like this, and I appreciate where I think it's Red Letter Media was saying it was a good movie, even though they spent most of their conversation not praising it. I think it was almost like it's good because it's better than the theatrical cut on taking everything into account. But I would almost draw, it's like, here is the line, Brian, between good and bad. Way above that line, Star Wars, The Godfather 1 and 2. There's truly brilliant, great films. They're way above the line. Then, way below, way below, there is some, every industry, every country's film industry churns out a lot of crap every year. The theatrical cut, while not crap, is a bad movie. It fails you may have some highlight moments, but it's a bad movie, I think. This is better than that, but it's still well under that line between good and bad. I don't think it's that good a movie. It's not that offensive a movie. It will, when I do my least to most offensive Zack Snyder films ranking, it will not be anywhere near the most. It's got a couple of moments where I'm like, that's kind of icky. But, I mean, yeah, he's made some other more interesting choices in other films. So I can't get that bothered by it either. And honestly, there was a time when I'm like, oh, these stop the Snyder cut folks. If they put half their energy into, I don't know, stopping voter suppression or, fighting anti-Asian racism. Wow, we could see some real change here. But nope, this is where they commit their time to. That said, there's another great... do you ever watch Royal Ocean Film Societies of Video essayist? He did a great piece, came out today. I'll put a card up where he goes, there's nothing new about Release the Snyder Cut. There was the Donner Cut, talked about in the aughts. There was, like, at each time, quantum leap from when I was, a younger man, when you were a younger man, a very active fan basing, save this picture. It's something that has been happening since there are movies, will continue to happen, especially with social media. And is it really that bad? Has my life been damaged because some Zack Snyder keeners got, begged a corporation for an opportunity to give them even more of their money? I don't think so. This film did not touch me in a bad place. Those fans didn't hurt me in any way. So, what the hell?
What are you going to hold up a Superman doll? I'm not going to go there.
We got just enough of a taste to have our laugh without getting too weird.
Yeah. I guess, as you were speaking, I kind of thought, it is sort of an interesting time that we're in with streaming services and filmmakers getting a second chance at a film. I think I would look at it this way. I do think it is interesting that it solves all of those sitting around having a beer discussions over, can you imagine if blah blah blah. Can you imagine if the Directors Guild wouldn't have come after George Lucas for not having opening credits in the front of Star Wars, and Lucas would have been able to direct Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi? Can you imagine? I mean, they're great movies, but can you imagine how much better they would have been?
Yeah,
and,
you're absolutely right.
You know, in the same way, like sort of the film school discussion that they did with the remake of Psycho, the one that had Vince Vaughn in it. I still get to see either, but I love that discussion. And
is it Gus Van Sant directed that, right?
Yeah, and, you know, talented people, a fascinating philosophical discussion. You know, did it turn out to be that great? Apparently not, according to most people. But you know, I think that what we're seeing now is the opportunity, because of the need for content and vertical integration between studios owning film, medium, whatever.
Owning in their distribution.
Yeah.
Like their end user distribution.
And because they have that vertical integration, the 4-quadrant, all that kind of stuff, I think it's an interesting thing to give a director a second chance to do it. As a film fan, I think it's an interesting exercise. I've yet to see one that pays off in terms of creating a great product or a better overall experience. But it is an interesting thing to see.
No, that's a great point. I myself, I think the only ones where it really worked, as if we're talking about like as a fan of film and fan of film storytelling, myself, I think and it's really just recutting the end scene, is Blade Runner, where, you know, they really did. It's not a total reimagining. It's not a, wow, they butchered this flick and here is the full Ridley Scott vision. It's more the, well, no, they ended it on a committee note and let's put my original ending in, and maybe some tweaks later because you got to be able to finance the DVD, the Blu-ray release. But, you know, the first director's cut of what, 3? Ultimate, the final.
You know, that might be one of that film might actually be one of the few Harrison Ford movies from that peak of his career, especially a sci-fi film, that I have not seen. I've seen plenty of stories and things on you know, Ridley Scott and all the different cuts for it. And is Deckard a replicant? I find all of that fascinating. Yeah. They said there's 7 different cuts of the film. But that is one that I have not seen.
We will take that up further in the green room after the show's done. After we finish this live to tape show. All right. Well then, I think we're done with our final thoughts. I did want to ask you though, Brian, what do you got coming up soon? What are you looking forward to? Is there anything you can tell my audience about what you're working on right now?
I am working on a few movie reviews to catch us up for Godzilla vs. Kong, coming out in a week. Actually, a week from tonight. Cool. Actually, yep. So I will be doing 3 for the most recent. You know, the 3 most recent ones: Godzilla 2014, Kong Skull Island, and of course Godzilla King of Monsters, in anticipation of the film, and then do a movie review and a couple rankings related with those. And interestingly, 2 days ago from the time we're taping this video, the MCU pushed back Black Widow from the beginning of May to the beginning of July 9th, roughly. So I'm going to be starting a comprehensive, in-depth MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, deep dive, movie reviews, rankings, that sort of thing. Yeah, in the near future, in the immediate future, focusing more on the MonsterVerse and Godzilla vs. Kong.
Cool. Well, that sounds very cool. And I've been putting up, again, Dragon Movie Guy on YouTube. There'll be a link in the description. you're active on Instagram, so I've got your @DragonMovieGuy. That's where you can find him on Instagram. You do have, correct me if I'm wrong, a Facebook page called Dragon Movie Guy. Is that correct? Or
yeah, it's a fan page / group.
Okay.
Yeah, you
Very
find me
cool.
there too.
All right. I was like, am I making something up? All right. Well, listen, Brian, thanks again for being on the show. Really appreciate it. I'll meet you in the green room in a second while I kind of wrap up here. All right. But thanks again. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for being on the show twice, even though our fans will only see once. Yeah.
It's our second chance to make a first impression.
Ooh, this is a good one. You just got all the zingers, all the little bon mots. All right, my friend. Okay, we'll see you in a second. I'll meet you in the green room. Okay, everybody. I'm just gonna say this right now. This will not be the official end. I'm probably gonna cut it right about. Actually, we are done. Fly, be free.
I've been in your world.